I'm super glad that you are all here tonight to listen our conference. Today it's an important day to me because I have two special guests. I work with them a lot every day by mail, but today they are here in Paris working with me, so I'm super happy. So let's get bienvenue Laura and David that are here tonight. So thank you, Laura and David, for coming here. So they arrived yesterday from Berkeley. They are our executive and academic director of the program that we have in partnership with UC Berkeley. So before we start talking about the Silicon Valley Clitches, let's explain you a little bit what is a school lab and why you are here today and what we do in this building. So this is Jean-Claude Charlet. It's one of the co-founder of a school lab. So I will let you speak a little bit what we do here.
Yeah, hi all, and thanks again, Laura and David. You know, just a little story to start. We actually had a special training for Laura and David because they landed yesterday morning. It was quite intensive because we picked them up at the airport, shipped them in a train to Nantes. No time to breathe, you know. They had the same conference yesterday night at, was it 8 p.m.? They were not dead yet. They had a short night. I don't know, in one state, they would wake up this morning, but they took a train at 6. Oh, you lazy guy, huh? Okay. Okay, anyway, they came back to Paris. They had another appointment this afternoon, and they should be right on time where they should, get a nap soon, otherwise they will die. So in case, you see them fall and during the presentation, just be patient because it's kind of normal, but it's sort of the idea of the experiment that you'll have at Berkeley and the life you'll have at Berkeley will be very intense and very thrilling. So we hope to give you an idea of what you will get here. So just a few words to introduce you to what we're doing here in this building and what should be your role for the Bridge Entrepreneurship Program. School Lab, well, it's a laboratory for school, so it's sort of a new kind of school where you experiment by making projects and changing the world. So we work actually we're an innovation studio. Sorry for the presentation, it's in French, but what we do is actually we train both students, startups, and people from big corporations to work together and change their mindset to the entrepreneurship mindset. So as part of School Lab, if you join the Bridge Entrepreneurship Program, you will be part of this ecosystem, this community. And as a startup, mixed student and startup student wanting to develop a startup, you will be part of first the Berkeley community. During the 4 months you will be there, and back here you will be part of the community of this building. So actually what we try to do is train the students to become startuppers and entrepreneurs, accelerate the startups to make their projects more robust and be more ready to leverage funds and go on market, because what we perceived is that most of there are so many students having bright ideas right now, but not all the ideas are mature. So what we're trying to do here is have you gain some time and some good experience to make your projects and ideas more robust and be able to raise money for a better code. And then we train the people from big corporations. They all want to work with startups or students because they realize that the Y generation is moving, and it's going to be the one that manages the big corporations now. So the big challenge is how all these people are going to work together. And in this building, what do we have? We have six floors. You will be here with the starter incubator program on the ground floor, and the bridge when you come back here. We have another program that's called Lean Factory and CPR, that are more student-based programs developing projects for big corporations with teams of students. So it's kind of a mix of entrepreneurship, corporate entrepreneurship, and startup programs. Then we have people in residence, more mature startups, you know, reaching 15, 20 people, having difficulties to find a landing space, and they're here because they're part of the community, and they like to grow here, still being in the middle of people that will, from whom they will get inspiration and collaborations. We have a whole floor of a La Poste innovation team, you know, La Poste, the mailing company. So they have their digital team here with startups from Starting Post, which is the incubator from for La Poste. And at the top floor, on the 5th floor, a very nice event space that's called Open Mind Cafe. So hopefully you'll be part soon of this community. You'll see it's very thrilling. Probably more thrilling than Berkeley, actually, because it's Paris. It's nice. Yes, thank you. So, Laura, I'm sure you agree. Otherwise, you wouldn't stay over the weekend. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of what we do here at School Lab. But the main thing today is to give you an overview and some appetite for the magical 4 months that you can spend at Berkeley.
So before you start to make the presentation, I just want to show you a little video that we find that it's funny because you will see it's the most big enterprise in Silicon Valley. The CEOs, they ask to the CEOs what are the biggest Silicon Valley cliché that they think they are. So let's see a little. It's like 1 minute. So just let's see. That wouldn't work. So I will show you that after because they will with the micro. So let's go and then.
Okay, so let's hope I don't give you a lot of cliches that she's going to debunk later. First of all, we have space envy for sure. This is a great space, and thank you for hosting us, Anna and Jean-Claude. This is our 4th year in partnership with School Lab, and it's a great way for us to bring more diversity to our program. School Lab has the good fortune of working with lots of great universities in France and even across Western Europe and other places, hopefully. Maybe Latin America in the future, we can bring in some other participants. But a great partner for us, and we're happy to be here. I've seen lots of familiar faces from the program for the last couple years, and I look forward to catching up over a couple beers a little bit later. A little bit about myself. My name is David. I've been at UC Berkeley for 3 years now, I guess. I've been involved with Learn to Launch for 2 years. I'm the academic program director. Laura is executive director of the program, and we are really busy, Jean-Claude. Laura is also director of the technology transfer program at the Institute for Transportation Studies. In the spring, when I'm not busy or super busy with Learn to Launch, where I work for the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. I teach a class on social innovation and technology. So that, and I started a business with a colleague about a year ago, and that's taking up a little bit of my time too. So we stay engaged with a lot. I guess, does this work? Maybe not. Okay. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. So the colleague I'm working with now is Ken Singer, and he's managing director at the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, and he has this phrase that a startup is really an act of rebellion. So there's lots of other interesting definitions by Steve Blank and Dave McClure and other textbook definitions out there. But when you think about it, when you're starting a company, you really are challenging the status quo. There are existing companies in the marketplace who own the market who really have absolutely no desire in giving you an inch. So when you present a new idea into the market and you have your startup, you are in essence basically saying your idea sucks and I can do it a lot better. These guys have a lot of money and they're going to protect their turf. So the deck is really stacked against you unless you have a lot of money, and I mean a lot of money. So how are you going to compete? What can you do to overcome this inertia by all these big giants in the marketplace? What you really have at your disposal as certainly your youth and your vigor and your energy, smart ideas, hopefully a small team and the right team. So you have agility and you have speed. And that is something that most big players in the market are lacking. We just spoke to one of our former students who's been working at a big company. You hear the words entrepreneurship these days, and a lot of companies, even companies coming to work at School Lab, are now trying to figure out ways to move faster in the marketplace. That's their answer to startups moving into their space, particularly looking at banking today, how it's being completely demolished by fintech startups. They're moving rapidly to foster innovation from within. So your key is agility and speed when you're starting your company. It all really comes down to great decision making and taking risks. And that's something that is really we see as that outcome of our program. We hope our students all leave with a stronger sense of confidence and how to make a decision quickly. Sometimes a quick decision is always not the right decision, but it's better than making no decision. And getting them to fail fast, fail more often, and get comfortable with failure and learn about resilience. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. The first 18 to how many people here are still in university? Anyone at a master's level? Okay, great. So we've spent probably 18 to 20 plus years of your education pounding out of you the ability of how to make a decision and how to take risks. All the things that you go through in your university life, from even as a small child all the way through your master's degree, we're teaching you how to do things exactly the opposite of the way you should behave when you have a startup team. Things like following the professor and listening, right? When you really should be rebelling and leading on your own. Collaborating. For a startup, you have to learn how to ask for help. You have to learn how not to be wrong and how not to be perfect. These are all things that are part and parcel of being in a startup team that really work against you in the educational space. So we've been working hard to develop courses and develop experiences to really get you out of that kind of track that you're in when you're coming through regular education and get you into more experiential learning. We kind of look at this process as a journey, and there's different phases. You can kind of look at it in 3 phases, sort of an incubation stage, a validation phase, and then an acceleration phase. I'm not going to go into all of those details. Each one of those phases really does take a different mindset. When you're forming a team and you're just trying to come up with an idea, you have to have a different perspective. When you're going out to customers and you're testing your product and you're getting feedback, you really have to understand what your customers are thinking. And then when you go to the market, you're really looking at the perspective of investors. How are you going to get funding? How are you going to accelerate? How are you going to go to the next level? Our mindset, the way we perceive things, is very much a product of our culture. It could be the way our parents raised us. It could be a religious background. It could just be the general national culture that we're familiar with. And you really have to learn over time how to be flexible in your perceptions and how you work with other people, how you perceive problems and how you solve problems. And that means stepping out of your comfort zone. So one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about today is perspective. And we're going to talk about, in general terms, for sure, general terms, the mindsets that Silicon Valley has recognized as keys to success. Everyone is going to have a different journey. There's going to be some things here that you're going to question whether they are actually valid or not. I welcome you to challenge them. But in general, these are things that we've kind of found overall that make companies and individuals successful entrepreneurs. Any questions on that so far before we kind of dive in? So perspective is an interesting thing. I just got a new puppy, so this is really interesting and cute, so it gives me a chance to talk about my dog. It's probably one reason this is on here. But you have to think through where your team is coming from. What is their cultural bias? How do they look at problems? How do they solve problems? You have to think about your investors. What are their perspectives in the marketplace? People can have very differing views of solutions, very differing views of the market. And how are you being perceived? These are all things that are really important, and we all bring a certain bias to these particular issues. So one of the things that we hope to help you solve, sorry this is a little bit out of the screen there, is by getting you to Berkeley and getting you out of your native environment, so to speak, that you will then be able to realize some things that are working, some things that aren't working, realize that there are different approaches and different solutions that can help you be more successful. That's really the biggest value I think we add. Coming to Silicon Valley for a week, you can see some great things, you can visit a few companies, but I think until you start talking to customers, and what makes it really great is there are so many different startups, there's thousands of startups, investors, all in one place, so very close in proximity. That is the real value and the magic of Silicon Valley. It's not the fact that it's in the US or it's in California or that there's a lot of money there. Those things are all true, obviously, but it's the networking and the proximity to tons of other people just like yourself who are looking for interesting problems to solve and unique and creative ways to solve them. So has anyone ever been to the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley? Yeah, great. So a few. It's sort of bound in the south of San Jose was sort of the origins of Silicon Valley, starting in the late 50s. I was gonna ask Laura just now when it started, but I guess she would probably kill me because she wasn't even around then. Late 50s, early 60s, with the Shockley Labs. Anybody heard of Shockley Labs? It's probably one of the names you'll never ever hear again. He started a transistor company, and it was really successful. And it got purchased. I should say they 8 guys from Shockley Labs got lured away by this company called Fairchild Semiconductor. That was the first sort of the genesis of Silicon Valley. These guys who were in a very comfortable cutting edge firm who got lured away by another company, they were called the 8 traders. That's how it all started. And from those 8 people who left Shockley Labs and went to Fairchild, Fairchild later went bankrupt, but those 8 went on to spawn hundreds of different companies in Silicon Valley. Out of those 8, AMD, processing, Intel were created. So out of this whole dynamism and this like realization that from within we can create new businesses really started back in the early 60s and has continued. The hardware business is less prevalent in Silicon Valley now as it is most places in the developed world. A lot of the hardware manufacturing has now moved obviously to lower cost production. And Silicon Valley has migrated north and east from traditional San Jose and Sunnyvale and Mountain View, where Google and Stanford, Palo Alto, that used to be the real heart of Silicon Valley. In the last 5 years, there's been a huge shift of software companies into the San Francisco area. There's been a really big boom for obviously young people like living in urban areas. There's more excitement in San Francisco as opposed to Sunnyvale. So we've seen a real shift northward. Also a big expansion into different markets, away from hardware into software. Another thing that most people don't realize about the Bay Area, the #1 employer is healthcare. Of all industries, healthcare is the biggest employer. And recently, the Zuckerberg Chan Foundation just invested $600 million for a new biohub in San Francisco as a partnership between Stanford, Berkeley, and UCSF. So we expect there to be a whole slew and a whole boom in startups in the biomedical space in the next 10 years. I'll skip over that list and just really kind of go through some of these things that probably are really familiar to you. How many of you have your own company? Okay, how many of you have ever pitched an idea before? Yeah, a lot of you, right? So no doubt you've heard of the power of the story, right? You have to have a story. Well, that really just all started, mostly came to prominence rather with Steve Jobs and Apple. He created when there was Apple kind of cratered and there was really nothing there and they didn't launch a product for I think about 1.5 years. They did not launch a product. He just created a great story that kept people engaged and interested. And he created a vision. So you have to have a story. You have to create a compelling interest from someone who's you're gonna get their attention and tell them why you, and why now. In the last few weeks, we've had several venture capitalists in our class in Berkeley. And some of them are beginning to challenge the prominence of the story, of the importance of the story. And one of them told us that the prototype is the new story. That VCs these days are sure interested in hearing about the problem and the story you want to tell, but they really want to see something. If you want to get someone's attention, put it in front of them, make sure it works. That is way more powerful because they're just bombarded these days with so many presentations and so many pitches. They really want to make sure that people have something that's actually working. But our history and our culture, our religion, our family histories are all passed down by stories. It's a very powerful human connection that you have to weave into your story. That's part and parcel of successful startups. Trust. Trust is a very cultural thing. It varies widely from your cultural traditions, could be your religious traditions, it could be your political traditions in many cases, often kind of go in opposite of trust. In Silicon Valley, for the most part, if you're not really sure, you should give people the benefit of the doubt. That's kind of the rule of thumb. People really are asking for advice. They want your opinion. They want to hear your ideas. You have to be comfortable sharing your ideas. People who come to Silicon Valley or anywhere, it's the same here in Paris, no doubt. If you're afraid to tell your story or share your ideas, if you're paranoid about someone stealing your ideas, your IP, you're not going to get very far. You won't learn much unless you share. Now, that is within reason, of course. You don't want to give away the secret sauce or give the code away to your algorithm, but you really do need to give information to get. Seeking fairness is another something that's very important. It's particularly in American culture. It may go against some stereotypes, but in generally, you really have to seek out a fair deal and not a zero-sum deal. It's not about winning. It's not about beating the other guy. It's about entering into an agreement or coming to an arrangement that is mutually beneficial. Everyone can win, and that sounds very American, pie in the sky, and optimistic and all those things, but we really do try to adhere to that. Failure. So our lead instructor for the program in Berkeley has written a whole book on failure. It's called The Other F Word. And it really is dissecting a lot of successful companies that we've all heard about today, Twitter and lots of others, and kind of going through their journey. And it's interesting to see what ideas they had first and how drastically different their successful company is from the original idea, or how they started down a path and failed again and failed again before they finally found the right team. In many cases, it's the team, or found the right technology, or maybe it was just a matter of timing, which is often the case. But you have to learn from failure, and learning to be resilient is something that's really challenging as well. Coming to Berkeley is a great safe space for you to be in an academic environment, be at a university. It's very dynamic. It's lots of interesting people to work with, and you can fail. Like, you're not going to be judged by anyone. You're away from friends and family and all prying eyes. So if you're interested in learning about that journey, there's some alumni around, but it's very critical. Like the same VCs from a couple weeks ago were like, oftentimes there's someone who comes in who's never done anything before, and they have a really great idea, and they have a great prototype. And then the next guy we see maybe doesn't have everything exactly in the same order, but they've gone through the process a couple times. They've failed. They've got some scars. They've learned. They often feel more comfortable partnering with those types of people who've really kind of learned how to bounce back, who've shown some leadership, who've shown that they're really passionate and that they're continuing, right? If you've never failed, it's a little bit bigger risk for an investor. Diversity. Anyone here row or been a member of a crew team before? Yeah, crew, like the rowing team? Yeah. Okay. Well, it takes this small person here at the helm to keep an eye on competition, to keep the pace of the boat, to make sure that the team is pushing themselves as hard as they can, but not too hard. And all in a row on the other side are lots of giants whose job is to do nothing but to pull really hard, and to pull exactly when she tells them to pull, and how fast, and to go right or go left. So this diversity is really important. This team couldn't function without everyone on the boat, and it goes from technical skills, having a diversity, having the right business people on your team, the right design people on your team, a mix of genders and a mix of cultures. It all goes back to having different perspectives that are really important. Silicon Valley is a little bit of a bubble in the sense of its diversity. Both coasts, if you're familiar with the US, are a little bit different. There's a wide range of diversity on the East and West coasts. That's where most of the startups in the US come from. There are other pockets in Austin and a few other places. And I attribute that mostly to the diversity that you can build in those areas, the teams that you can build. Who hasn't heard this before, right? You try to make your product perfect before you take it to market. There's a saying that you're basically breakfast for Google, right? Google is going to kill you. If you cannot move to market faster than Google with your great idea, then they've got a team of thousands of engineers. Give them insight into an idea, an interesting problem, and they're going to run at it furiously. So you have to move fast and make a market. If you wait till your product is perfect, if you wait till you have the perfect team, if you wait for all of the planets to align, it's going to be too late. It's better to get a product into the market, to get the market excited, and just move forward and take the risk. And pay it forward. How many here have a mentor or someone they're working with as part of their team or being coached? Yeah, very valuable, right? To have someone to act as a coach, as a sounding board, to give you expert advice. We call those ninjas sometimes if you really need someone who's very specific in their skill, whether it's technical or market expertise. We call on those people all the time. You know, for our class, when the teams come to Berkeley, they come from Paris, or we have students from Germany and Morocco. Obviously, you may not have a full network in Silicon Valley. I will say that there are tons of French people in Silicon Valley. There are a lot of great successful startups owned by French people and founded by French. There are lots of French investors in Silicon Valley. So that is one positive thing, is that Jean-Claude and gang can help plug you into that network. They have introduced us to interesting mentors that we bring in front of the class. But then we open our network at Berkeley, and we make introductions. And we really help teams really find out the best person to talk to and to get the ball rolling. Now, obviously, you have to go out and do lots of groundwork. But there are literally thousands of meetings every month on every conceivable topic and technology and market that you could possibly be interested in. So you have to pick and choose wisely, but there's lots of opportunities. And this whole concept of pay it forward is why those people pick up their phone and answer your email. It's because someone answered their call when they were starting out. And that is really, I think anyone here who's gone through the program or has spent time trying to launch a project, one of the things they always say is that they're amazed at how CEOs, founders, investors are willing to answer an email, fill out a form, hold a meeting, take a meeting with them. People are really sensitive to the help they got, and they want to make sure that they return the favor. And that really keeps the engine running. And that's something that we make sure that our students always understand. It's one of the last things we leave them with when they head out the door, is to make sure that they know when they get asked for help that they're ready to give it. Collaboration. This is another thing that's hand in hand with trust. And I think one of the things that's interesting to a lot of people is make sure you know who your competitors are. And that's not just looking over your shoulder. It's not being always worried about what they're doing. You should be. You should run scared always. But you should try to build friendships, try to build a rapport with your competitors. It's the best way to understand what you have in common, what's coming down the pipe, what are they concerned about, what are they hearing about other mutual competitors. It's really a sense of community that you can build. Certainly you're not going to share all information, but it's great to just know what's going on. Sometimes if your project doesn't work out, they may be the next place you land, or vice versa. Maybe there's a merger in the future somewhere with these guys. So always make nice and play nice with your competitors. And then lastly, something that comes natural to a lot of Americans is overconfidence. But one thing you have to do if you're going to survive is really believe that you can change the world, change your tiny little sliver of it, change your part of the market, change the way people interface with the technology. Whatever you can do, there's definitely an impact you can make, and those are the skills that we're really pushing people to really kind of go after and to tackle, and then to have the confidence to do it. If you guys don't solve it, someone else will, sooner or later. Better for you to jump on it and make your impact now. Any questions? Any comments on kind of the mindsets and culture of Silicon Valley? Anyone feel like they need to debunk anything or question? Yes. Oh. Why not? Yes. Everybody hear the question. So is collaboration something that's maybe a cultural bias? Yes. In the US, it seems to come a little bit more naturally. How many students here have ever been through an entire course and been graded as a team and not as an individual? Good. So this is a trend that's been probably happening in the US consistently in the last decade or so, even in high schools. There's a lot of coursework where there is an individual component, obviously, but there's a lot of hands-on teamwork. So culturally, I think Americans are a little more open. I think another thing that impacts, that's unique about the US, it doesn't really matter where you came from or what degree you have. In some cultures, that's really important. We have students from China or from Japan or other cultures, even in Chile. I work a lot in Santiago. There's definitely a hierarchy in terms of all parts of corporate life as well as social life, and then in the educational sphere. So breaking down those barriers when you put people together can be a bit of a challenge. Anybody have any comments or experience in that, either in France or other places? Kind of sink or swim these days for us. We bring students in. They have a semester. It goes by really quickly. You have to learn to find an idea and a problem to solve. If you can't build a team around it and you can't collaborate, then you have to go join another team. It's not a one-man show, and that is a difficulty. And you can talk to anyone who's been through the program. It can be painful. You have to be willing to be open to new ideas. And our program is really an educational program, a training program. It's not about guaranteeing you to come build a team and launch your product or your idea. It's about learning the skills of how to identify a good opportunity, what is a real pain point, a real migraine, we would call it, something to solve, and then being able to build a team around it and figure out how you execute how you go out and validate a market, and then once you build a customer base, how to get an investor. Not everyone who has a great idea gets to build a team around it. It's very tough. We meet every week with each team, and basically try to keep a pace. But each team, just like in real life, is responsible for making sure that no one is going to be dead weight. I mean, it is not their incentive to let someone hide and not contribute effectively. So it's a bit of a self-management, which is basically the way we operate in corporate life, right? Companies these days cannot afford to have unproductive employees. Startups in particular who have no money can't afford unproductive team members. It's the way it works. Any other questions? Any questions about the program in particular? Laura can answer questions, or Jean-Claude or Anna, if there's details about any of that. Yeah, you raised your hand. Yep. I think for me, it's dynamic, and it's hard to put that into, define another word. There is a sense of energy there. There are a lot of ideas. People are willing to share ideas, and everyone's always willing to listen. By like, oh, I have a great idea. People are like, oh, tell me about it, right? You have a conversation, and you hear it all the time. Oh, I was just working on this, and it's shit, right? It just went south, and no one ever says, oh, you know, they may go, well, that sucks. But the very immediately, like, oh, what are you going to do next? There's no dwelling on failure. There's no sense of judgment or like letting people kind of like, you know, kind of go down into the dumps. It's about moving forward. And so if I had any one word, it would be dynamic or dynamism. Yeah. And one other thing that contributes to it, and I was talking about it last night, is diversity. Silicon Valley is a very diverse community. Actually this year, we had 5 Nobel laureates from the US, 6 maybe, 5 or 6. Every single one of them was an immigrant. Not a single one was born in the US. They're American citizens, but they're all immigrants. So it's part and parcel of our culture. In Silicon Valley, there are tons of founders and investors that were not born in the US, that have become citizens or are just living there and living their dream. I had a question. I'll let Laura jump in on that one. Who's there from the beginning?
So Learn to Launch was actually my own little startup, and it came out of a need from a group of students in France. The faculty member came to us from École Polytechnique. He's got a bunch of engineers who really needed to immerse themselves in Silicon Valley and learn about innovation and entrepreneurship in the real world. I'm an engineer, and I know that engineers often think that if we have the best solution or the craftiest or the most elegant, that of course it's going to win. And what happens in the real world is that's not so. That we need to partner. So we talk about diversity in teams. We needed to build a program to train this particular group how to work with designers and business people and marketers and communicators and everyone else that's going to come together to make an idea successful. And so I teamed up with Mark Coopersmith, our lead instructor, and he and I treated it like our own little startup. And I like to say we launched with minimum viable product. We did not wait until it was perfect. We hit the ground, we got started, and we rapidly iterated through it, constantly improving the course. And then after that first year, building out and bringing in more and more students from other schools and other backgrounds so that we could make really robust teams and make a really great experience for all the students. So the origins really come out of Mark and I having, recognizing a need and figuring out how to solve it, then building that minimum viable product, iterating on it, and then scaling. So I feel like it's a perfect example of what we're teaching.
Okay, yeah.
So the University of California is not a business, and we've never had to actually make money. We have to cover our costs. And so, and in the United States, school costs money. The tuitions are high. And so students pay for the course, and we plow that money into site visits, instructors, bringing in the best speakers. We host a lot of events. And so it's nice not to have to make a profit. I'm never going to have a shareholder, and I'm never going to make any more or less money. So that's the one, maybe that's the one downside. It works for you all, but it's not like a business in that regard. So it's a tuition-based program. Yeah, I'm really hoping that one of the startups that comes out of the program decides to endow the program going forward and fund it for all future students and give us a nice building like this. And so think about that first, because somebody in this room could be that person one day.
I think if you're looking to launch a business eventually, either initially or eventually in the US, it's critical to be in the market. If you're taking money from angel investors, particularly if they're located in Silicon Valley, there's going to be a strong bias for you to be nearby, so they can understand what you're working on, that they can plug you into their network. It's a little less about being on top of you in terms of managing you, but just providing you as much access to their network and as possible. So if that's something that's interesting to you, then it's the place to be. There's lots of ways to get funding here in France, and there's lots of smart ideas and spaces like this that do a great job. But if you want a place to experiment and to kind of dip your toe into the water and build a team and try an idea and network, it's a great option. Yeah. Anyone else? You have to be enrolled in a graduate level program. If I say anything wrong, you can correct me on that. I believe you have to be enrolled in a graduate level program to participate. Yes. Anywhere. You just have to be still an active student or researcher. Basically, the way the program works, and this gets into a lot of details, and we can take the question offline a bit later, is the visa is essentially tied to your status as a visiting scholar or a researcher. So you cannot come and be actively employed in the US on another venture. So that's the distinction. But you can be from anywhere. You don't have to be from France. Yes. We have lots of teams working on projects for the French market. There are teams that have landed back here in France who are either with the same team that they started with in Berkeley. Many of them are scattered and either have come up with new ideas or joined other teams. So it does not have to be focused on the US market. I will tell you, doing customer validation and customer discovery in Silicon Valley for a French market has its own unique challenges. As long as you can work around that, no issues. Yeah. You had a question, yeah. Okay, I'm going to pitch that to Anna. Anna or JC? So the question was the criteria of evaluation. So how do you select candidates, and what is the best candidate if they're going through School Lab? How do you know they're going to deliver? Ooh.
I'm going to echo on motivation. We want to see people who are just dedicated to coming in, working hard, collaborating with others, and taking risks. But I wanted to answer the opposite question, and what do we not care about? What doesn't matter to us? What doesn't matter? You don't have to come with an idea. You don't have to come with a concept. And you don't have to come knowing for sure that you want to be an entrepreneur. So we take students who then apply what they've learned and go into the corporate world and are working on innovation intrapreneurship. We've got students that come in with no idea and through our sessions either come up with an idea or join in someone else's team with an idea. So those are things that we don't look for, that don't matter when you come in.
I mean, we know you guys are super smart, and we also work with students at École Poly. You guys can build anything. You can model anything. I'm not necessarily concerned about anyone's technical skills. You've proven yourselves for the most part in that. For me, there's only really one profile that doesn't succeed, and that is someone who is stubborn, thinking that they have an idea that is the best idea on the planet, and they don't want to change their mind or work with anyone else. That doesn't work. Anything else works. If you're open-minded and you just want to put your skills to work on solving a cool problem, it's going to be great. Yeah. Yeah. There was another question. You are correct. Yes, and you guys want to take the yes. So yes, there is a cost. Yeah. €20,000 if anyone didn't hear. Yep. So that includes, you want to go through what that includes?
Yeah, so the €20,000 include both the 4 months at Berkeley and the landing phase here in Paris, and that excludes the living costs of housing, food, and so on.
It seems like a very large investment. I'm not saying that the time and money is badly spent or anything, I don't know. But it seems like a very large investment, and that is difficult to justify in terms of the development of a project, especially when you're counting every penny you spend on a...
Maybe I should add also something that it's sort of a